5:58.
Well, we'll go early. Okay, welcome. I'd like to call this Finance Committee meeting to order. First item we have is assignment for request for council action. We have several for the Finance Committee, 23-174, budget amendments, 23-175, increase expense for fire safety services, PO 23-569, 23-176, RFPs for drug screen and related professional services, 23-177, amend salaries and benefits code, reclassify part-time to full-time account clerk. 23-178, amend zoning code, chapter 1105, various sections. 23-179, accept utility rate review recommendation, water rate increases. 23-180, agreement with the Wheeling Lake Erie Railroad repealing ordinance 9822. 23-181, expenditure for HSH Construction Engineering Department. 23-182, discussion from non-municipal courthouse architect selection. 23-183, increase expenditure concrete contracting solutions for the park department. 23-184, increase expenditure from Dyna Supply, PO 23-425. 23-185, amend ordinance 8023, gap conversion contract with Ray and Associates. 23-186, then and now for Ray and Associates. And 23-187, expenditure for the Candlelight Walk holiday lights on Public Square. Next item we have is 23-174, budget amendments. The first one we have is 2023-42, economic development and advertising. Keith,
It's a pass-through of a donation.
any questions?
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 23-43, fire department donation. Looks like it's just a donation.
Same thing.
That was a nice donation, though, from 620. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 23-175, increased PO fire safety services for the fire department. Chief Walters?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a PO increase for operating supplies and works in conjunction with that donation that we just had in the prior item. 620 Corp. donated $10,000, and we're allocating that to this PO to purchase the firefighter turnout gear that it was intended for.
Questions?
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 23-176, RFPs for drug screening related professional services. Who's handling this one? Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. President. We do this annually, just to get the best price, so we're just requesting authorization to do so again.
Questions?
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. 23-177, reclassify part-time clerk to a full-time account clerk for the finance department. Keith?
Thank you. We kind of spelled it out in the request here, but we have a good employee in this position, and we'd like to keep them. Within our office, the issue is that we don't have the time for cross-training, and if this position's empty, then we have a real problem on our hands, and in the current environment, I think we need to make this full-time in order to keep this person with the department. We have paid healthcare to this position, even though it's part-time, because of an issue with another employee who was unable to be at work due to a medical issue, so I brought that to your attention before, so that's already being paid, and at least will be until that year is up.
And in the near term, it looks like the carry forward funds, and that'll cover the costs, and that'll be added in the later budgets.
Right.
Yeah, we talked about this. I think Keith has come to us on many occasions over the years, and we've always struggled with it, but it seems like, with the carry forward and the plan increase, the plan that we have going forward, seems like it should be a workable solution for the department, and plus being able to keep an employee that he wants to keep. So anybody have any questions?
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 23-178, amend zoning code, various sections. Mr. Dutton?
Thank you, Mr. President. These are amendments to the zoning code, which were reviewed by the Planning Commission at their last meeting in September. They voted to recommend approval. They will also require a public hearing at a future council meeting. The base of these amendments has to do with uses. So each zoning district in the city has a list of uses. which are permitted and conditionally permitted. So there were some issues with basically consistency with the uses. They were not defined, had different phrasing in different parts of the code. So this aimed to kind of consolidate that, fill in the gaps where definitions were incorrect. I used the example of funeral home, which currently is only permitted in the MU district and has a parking requirement for funeral home and mortuary. So what we did is we added a definition for it. We allowed it in the C3 district, which is where our only funeral home is, and removed or mortuary from the parking requirement. So these are the kind of, they seem minor, but when you're getting down into specifics and you're looking at definitions, whether use is permitted or not, you need these things to back it up. I know they're permitted uses, those are permitted by right. Conditional uses are permitted with approval from the Planning Commission. These conditional uses in the tables have superscript, which takes you to a different section of the code with specific requirements. There were also a number of errors in these specific requirements. There was some misnumbering, there were some that just didn't apply at all, and other similar problems. So if you look in the amendments, anywhere there's an asterisk, particularly in the definitions, that definition was just never used. So we define it and then we never use it anywhere else in the code, so it was just removed. There are also a few kind of miscellaneous amendments. 112906 basically just clarifies that you are allowed to build a building in the MU district, which wasn't very clear. 114504D, areas that are exempt from providing parking in the downtown continue to be exempt. However, they need to have a plan submitted to the Planning Commission of how they're going to deal with parking. If it's on-street, if it's parking lots, if they're adding some private parking, it's just giving the Planning Commission some background of how they're going to deal with that. 1145.10 was increase of width of driveways. This was requested by the Planning Commission previously. 1155.05, setbacks for trash dumpsters were reduced. This was due to a number of variances on commercial properties. Then finally, 1155.11, it just kind of clarifies between outdoor storage and bulk storage, which it kind of used interchangeably previously. I think that's the majority of it. It is 38 pages long, and that was not intentional, but when you get into these things that kind of counteract with each other, it's a domino effect, and you end up editing a lot of pages.
And of course, you know, the overlay district that covers the major corridors leading into the city, of course, will still be there, even though the changes may change the, I think some of it's MU changes the uses of those particular corridors, the structure and look have to still remain the same because they're subject to the overlay district.
Yeah, those overlay regulations still apply, yeah.
All right, so your next step is to the meeting this end of the month to the Planning Commission and then the public hearing, and then bring it back to us.
Yeah, I went to the Planning Commission, got their recommended approval, so it'd be a public hearing and move on to the.
Oh, just go to the public hearing next, okay. So that'll probably be the next meeting, we'll do that. Okay, anybody have any questions? All right, we'll wait for the public hearing on that. 23-179, accept utility rate review recommendation for the water rate increases. Keith?
Thank you. If you look at the last page, or I guess it's second to last page, it's what the recommendation is. Our rate from Avon, so we buy the water from Avon, the rate that we pay to Avon is going up by a penny per 1,000 gallons in 2024, and then by 8 cents in 2025. The reason for that is because the increases in Avon's rate are actually more uniform, but they have a decrease in the rate they're charging us for the maintenance and operation of the line. So those offset in '24, but then there is no offset in '25. So this recommendation kind of smooths out the increase to our customers, because that 0.5% increase is difficult anyway because of the rounding on when you apply it to our rates. So rather than trying to do that and then have a 0.5% increase and then a 4% increase, it's basically a little over 2 and a little over 2. You can see that there. That's what utility rate review agreed to. So that's what we're asking for here. We had multiple meetings with Avon Lake over this, and I don't know if there's any questions beyond that.
Well, you got the rate increases, and then it also talks about some of the changes that we just made to the water accounts with the security deposit, changing it to, I think, 200. There's another recommendation that they would stagger it in, but I don't know if that's necessary to stagger it in.
No, that kind of got taken off the table because
Oh.
we covered it separately, so we kind of, and the other thing, because in my original request, there was also a request to increase the deposit for the key. Our bulk water customers have a key to access the bulk water, but based on the break on Granger Road, we're not going to be selling bulk water anymore, so that just became a moot point.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, you know, we try to keep up with Avon rates just so we're not stuck in a situation where, you know, passing on the cost is, we're absorbing too much of the cost to cover our own payment for the water. So, I mean, these have to be done, and I think the increases aren't that drastic, but they're necessary.
No, I mean, 2% a year, I think when you look at what our customers are seeing in increases in other areas, I don't think everybody's going to think this jumps off the page.
Great. Questions?
Mr. President? Just
Yeah,
a nosy question. Why would the fixing the break on Granger Road stop us from selling bulk water?
What we did is we cut and capped the line that was going under Rocky River. It was 100 years old, and so then we were working, Patrick and I and Andy working with the county to run a feed from the county, so that'll be taken over by the county, and therefore we'd be selling our water to the county line in bulk, and it doesn't make sense.
Okay, all right, okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Move to approve?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 23-180, agreement with the Wheeling Lake Erie Railway, repeal ordinance 9822. Patrick?
Thank you. We did get a permit from Wheeling Lake Erie last year, that's the 9822 ordinance, to cross under their rail lines with our water line on West Smith. I think we've talked before, we've had some issues with that plan. It hasn't worked, so we're kind of rerouting it, and as a result, that changed the description in that permit that we got from Wheeling. So they wanted to issue another one, so that's why we're here to repeal the last one and go with the one that they're ready to approve.
Patrick, I haven't seen this before. I don't know whether it's the same as the last one or not, but there's some language in this, especially under the indemnification clause, that we need to talk about.
Okay, yeah,
The other
it's
thing
literally
is-
the same in just the description page, the location page.
The other thing is, do we have this $5 million insurance separate that they call out for?
The contractor has that, yes, they did provide it.
Well, I remember that, but, and I assume that's Fetchco, right?
Correct.
Well, this thing requires us to carry a separate policy, which is different from what I remember, and maybe I'm misremembering, but we're supposed to have a separate insurance policy covering our indemnification responsibility. I don't remember ever seeing that.
I don't think we do have that.
So that's another thing we're gonna have to probably discuss.
So what I hear is that we could approve this subject to review and modification by the law director for compliance issues, I think with Ohio law. Everybody any questions on that?
Okay, I'll make a motion then to approve the agreement with the Wheeling and Lake Erie Railroad, subject to final approval and any modification by the law director.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 23-181, expenditure for HSH Construction Engineering. Patrick?
Thank you. There's a storm sewer that crosses from Woodland Drive along property line and exits out the rear in a ravine that is pretty much failed. The existing head wall has fallen. Pipes have kind of been washed away. So this is the cost to hire HSH to repair and replace that section of storm sewer.
Questions?
Move to approve?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 23-182, a discussion on the municipal courthouse architect selection. Patrick?
Thank you. Now that our agreement with the county is finalized, we can start the selection process to hire an architect for the renovation of the 1969 building. Per Ohio law, we have to follow what's called a qualification-based selection process, which means we issue a public announcement and offer any architects that are interested to submit their qualification statements to us. We review those and rank them, and then once we decide who we think is the most qualified, we can enter into negotiations with that firm to hopefully come up with a contract. So I wanted to let you know about the process, and more specifically, We would like to form a committee that would review and rank these qualification statements once they come in. We're suggesting committee be the mayor, a representative from council, the judge, the municipal court manager, and myself. Talking to Greg, it sounds like he would be more comfortable if we actually did come back to council next meeting and pass a resolution or ordinance or whatever, forming this ad hoc committee.
And this is similar to what we did with the parking garage, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, at that point, we did not go to council with pass any resolution for the committee. I don't know that we're required to here. I think we just want to make it everything transparent.
That's right, John. Look how well the parking garage went.
Yeah, a few lawsuits, it's always fun. I guess the question is on council, I mean, is there any interest that anybody willing to serve on that? I mean,
Yeah.
we got, everybody wants to serve.
It's up to you. We can make it a
I
bigger
guess I'll
committee.
talk to everybody, and if it comes down to it, we'll pick somebody. But that sounds fine, and by the next meeting, we'll know the answer. Mayor?
I just wanted to mention to the council that I asked the judge for input of who he wanted from the court, and that was his two selections, the judge and the court manager. Just, we didn't decide that. That came from next door.
Okay. All right. I mean, I guess so how many does that make on the committee? It's those two, that makes 4, 5, just 5 members on the committee.
5 was our suggestion.
Right.
You can make it whatever you want, I suppose.
Well, I mean, if there's more input, I know there's members of council that have been involved in various projects with the architects, and they may be able to bring some kind of knowledge from the history that that might be helpful, but we could talk about that and make a determination. Okay. All right, we'll let you know before the next meeting.
Thank you.
23-183, increased expenditure for concrete contracting solutions for the Parks Department. Is it Jansen?
Jansen asked me to handle this for him. He's not going to be here, and I've kind of been involved.
Okay.
This is a proposal. This is dealing with the skate park in Reagan Park. As you know, I think council passed an ordinance not too long ago authorizing $120,000 to bid the replacement of the concrete pad out there. Well, we're pursuing this idea. What it is somebody to come in and grind that concrete. The concrete's not in bad shape. It's just way too rough for skateboards and rollerblades and stuff like that. So we actually found 2 contractors. They both came up, gave us proposals. This is the one that was the cheapest, and we're recommending. We are going to, assuming this passes, have them come in and do just like a small test area to make sure the process works. If it does, then we go ahead and do the entire thing. Jansen's estimating the total cost is $33,000, and as I mentioned, if this works, we would then be able to rescind that $120,000 ordinance. It would be saving almost $90,000.
Okay. Questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 23-184, increased expenditure for Medina Supply for the street department. Nino?
Thank you, Mr. President. We started the year with a $10,000 PO in an effort to get through the end of the year for covering expenditures with concrete and stone. We'd like to increase it to $25,000.
Questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 23-185, amend ordinance 8023, gap conversion contract with Rain Associates. Keith?
First of all, I'd like to address this and the next one at the same time because they're 2 parts of the same thing. Our contract for the gap conversion stipulates that if there is a new GASB statement, they can increase the amount to cover that. The people at GASB, I'm pretty sure, are paid by the statement, so they make sure they come out with something every year. And this year's was GASB 87, which dealt with leases, which on first blush you wouldn't think would affect us much because we don't have a lot in the way of leases, but the way they worded it, a lot of our software agreements were viewed as leases under that new statement, so we had to pull up software contracts that we never really had to give to the auditors before, compile all those, get them to them, and then get them reviewed to determine how they were going to be treated on the basis of this new statement. So there was an extra $2,600 in billing, which creates the need for this one, which is to increase the contract by the $2,600, and the next one because they're already done and we still need to pay them, and so it's a then and now.
And that's why the emergency clause in both of them. Questions?
Okay, make a motion for 23-185, amend ordinance 80-23 with the emergency clause.
Second, including emergency clause?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. And 23-186, then and now, regarding Ray and Associates, based upon what Mr. Durham just said.
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second, including emergency clause?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 23-187, expenditure for holiday lighting on Public Square, Main Street, Medina. This seems to be coming up every meeting. So, but I have some information on this. George from Main Street, Medina, worked with a vendor, and it had other vendors within the same vendor, to talk about what we wanted to do in the square. And if you remember correctly, the few meetings ago, we approved purchasing garland on the four corners of the square, around the gazebo, some wreaths around the gazebo. Also, with the money that was bequested to the city from the gentleman that went to Medina High School, we were able to purchase a new wreath on the courthouse, since the other one's turning into an egg shape, and that's not the kind of shape we want for a wreath. So that's been ordered. So the total cost in looking at what we purchased or approved before, which was $27,500, and this new request, which I think is more than the $40,000 we have available. It's kind of like $49,000 or so. It could change depending on what the final, cost would be. The original ordinance we passed for 27.5, we were going to, meaning the city was going to pay the vendor directly, and we thought it might be easier just to have the money available and give it directly to Main Street Medina, and Main Street Medina pay the vendors and just give us the receipts to show that the money was spent on holiday lighting, to satisfy the auditor's review of the account of the bequest, to make sure the money was spent on what the bequest, was set aside for. Now, currently, the $40,522.67 was what we had at 3 o'clock in the account, and then Mr. Pacoli took 8,000 out of it because of the south side of the square, and I believe the east side of the square need new, lights on the buildings, because it's been, I think, 9 years or 12 years, 9 years? So, Bobby Duker has to go back and change those out now because they're dry rotting out because of the sun. So that's coming out of that. And in order to get it back to 40,000, I think we should recommend, since the city is really not putting any money into the square yet, because it's been all through the bequest, to put that 8,000 back in out of the general administration account. And then in speaking with Mr. Sam, they were, make an effort to raise the difference to cover the cost to do all what we want to do. Now, what this includes is we're not only going to do the garland around the four corners, the gazebo, the wreaths around the lighting, light poles, but we're going to do 20 trees within the square, because there's 4 quadrants in the square, 5 trees in each quadrant for 20, one with a color, and then spritzers on the color tree to make it look nicer. I think most people saw the lighting on the square with the smaller tree with the spritzers, but that would be the goal this year, and that would be the acquisition of it, and then the ongoing maintenance of it or use of it would be, of course, our responsibility. I think we're kind of used to that because we've done it for the last 12 years. And, there are some replacements that need to occur. There might be some damage by squirrels, but we can't control that anyways. But from the street trees, we've had a little bit of that, but not an unduly huge amount of damage from squirrels. Just a few nasty squirrels out there doing damage to it. But they like it for some reason. But I think that would be the plan, and hopefully then this could be all done this year. And I think the other thing I forgot to mention, we included I think it was the fountain lighting, which was, a little addition, for, a little more. I think it's for younger kids, but I think older people like it too. But this will redo the square because everything was kind of getting dilapidated and being used for these 9 years. And I think that it's time, you just have to buy new stuff. And that's kind of this is going to replace all the old stuff. And hopefully it'll last another 10 years before we have to do this again. But I think it'll look great. I think we're all cognizant of the fact that this event brings a lot of people to the square, and they spend a lot of money in Medina, and we want to keep that up. So I don't think there's any issue with it unless somebody has a concern or would like to do it. I know Mr. Lamb had a concern about the street trees. I just don't think there's enough money there to do that this year, unfortunately. But we got to look at that next year. unless you want to make a donation. That's the only thing we can think about. Any other questions?
Mr. President?
Yes, Mayor.
Just for the, I know John knows this, but for the clarification of the other council members, so the south and the east side are being done this year, the west and the north side were done last year. So that means that the entire square will be done after Bobby does those last two sides, which will take us into the foreseeable future. Hopefully, we can get another 8-9 years out of them like we did the first time.
And I guess for Main Street Medina, George, anything that I missed or you want to add or anything? Okay.
You're gonna need to have down here, because you have the account for the funding, but then you added in this discussion that we're pulling $8,000 of city funds. That's gonna be general administration, so that's 001.
Yeah, Kathy already changed the ordinance. I think everybody has a
Okay.
copy up here. I don't know if you got a copy of it, but if you look on.
I didn't know
the
that you had that already.
Section 2 covers that. You have, that's an old one here. Is that, you got another one there?
I get the new one.
You got the new one?
Yes.
Yeah, the new one, Section 2.
Section 2, 141,031, 522.
That's only
That's the right
for
one?
32,522.67, and then 001, 007, 07, 52215 is the 8,000. You guys don't have it, but I got that here.
Okay.
I don't know how I got that, but it was
And-
sitting in front of me.
Since this all came up within the last like half hour, we may need an appropriation adjustment there, which if we do, you'll see it at the next council meeting. Just
Understood.
be aware of that.
Well, we just want to make sure we get this going, because I know time's running short. I know it's not October yet, but October is the big time that a lot of this has to occur, because, you know, it's only 3 weeks in November before the Candlelight Walk starts, and there's a lot of work to be done, so. And we got to make sure the order it gets here, so we have to make sure that's the case. So anybody have any questions on that?
I do have one question on the email that went from Teresa to Kathy on the final estimates. There's 4 trees times an average of 30 strands per tree, $5,600 per installation? $5,600 per tree or for?
No,
or
that
is
changed
the
today.
whole- Okay.
We have an update that George received from the vendor, and there's a better breakdown of the cost of buying the lights, the cost of putting the lights on the first year, because we're not going to put them on. And then the cost of putting the spritzers, as we saw, there's going to be 20 of them, and then the cost of putting those on. We're going to have to take them down. I don't think we're going to take all the lights down of all the trees. We're going to leave it up in the canopy of the trees alone, like we've done before, but take them down on the trunk so it's not as visible, just so it doesn't look kind of weird. But the numbers that you're looking there, those are older. Those aren't the
Okay.
updated numbers.
All right. Thank you.
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Is there anything else to come before finance before we recess into executive session?
If not, I make a motion. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yes,
Okay,
Bill,
just let me clarify whatever you were talking about the street trees.
sure.
It wasn't my idea about the street trees. I don't know if you ever talk to people in town. I mean, I don't know how many people you maybe ever talk to people in town, but what I was talking about, and I think I made it clear, was that is the thing I have heard from people in Ward 3, Ward 4, Ward 2, and Ward 1, that the one thing that they thought we could improve on, because they thought they were so poorly done compared to a lot of other communities that seem able to do that, was those street trees. That is what I said. I didn't say it was me,
No,
which
no,
is what
you-
you just said. I'm not done, which is what you just said, right? It was simply by talking to people during the year, that's exactly what I heard and kept track of, because most of what we do looks really, really good. And most communities, I mean, if you look at a lot of communities, particularly around Columbus, they are doing the street trees that aren't vastly different, I don't think, from our trees,
Correct.
but they look better.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we had a cost, George, you sent over a cost of those. There's 100 street trees, and I think the cost was $34,000 to wrap them. And I think that was kind of the you know, hey, we got to step back a little bit. We would love to do it, and it would look 100% better. And I think people would love it, but again, we have a cost issue that maybe we could try to solve that, to redo them, or do something a little bit nicer on the street trees, because Bill's correct. People talk about it all the time, and it does look kind of haphazard a little bit when the strands are all over the place, and I do understand that some vehicles rip them and move them and all this other stuff, so, we had to figure a better solution out for that instead of, continuing it, but I don't think that's possible this year, but it would have been nice. All right, any other questions?
Okay, if not, I'll make a motion at 6:29 PM to go into executive session for two purposes. The first is consider the purchase of property if premature disclosure of information would give an unfair competitive bargaining advantage to a person whose personal or private interest is adverse to the public interest, as well as conferences with the law director of the city concerning disputes involving the city that are subject to pending or imminent court action, to include Mr. Patton, Mr. Huber, and Mayor Hanwell.
Second?
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Lamb,
Yes.
Rose.
Yes.
Shields,
Yes.
Coin,
Yes.
Simpson.
Yes.
Hare.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
We'll be recessing into executive session to discuss what Mr. Shields just mentioned. We'll be coming out of executive session, reconvening into finance, adjourning finance, taking no action of any items discussed in executive session. We are in recess.